Well, I want to say hello and good morning to all of our listeners from around the world and the globe. I want to welcome you to another edition of This Morning with Soulivity, broadcasting live from our studio right here in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital here in America, and on KMET 1490 AM radio in Southern California. My name is Brian Wesley Johnson, as you probably already guessed and know. We have a great show for you today. But before we get to that, I want to introduce to you my beautiful and amazing co-hosts, Sheila Applegate and Dr. Chanel DeGuzman. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brian. You are just so enthusiastic. I just love your energy.
Well, hey, that's what we do here. We got, I'm excited about hearing both of you and sharing what's going to be going on today with our show. Before we get to that, how has your week been? So I'll go to you, Dr. Chanel. I mean, I've talked to Sheila a little bit, but
Yes. So it's been a great week.
Mhm.
We started the week with Juneteenth, so that was a
Yes,
great celebration,
yes.
commemoration, and then just a nice flowing work week. And then my big thing is, as I shared with you all, my son will be moving to U of M East Quad on
Yes.
Saturday. So we're super excited. I won't see him again until August,
Uh-huh.
unless he comes home for 4th of July. But other than that, yes, this starts the new journey.
All right. Go blue.
Go blue.
And go green. Okay, I have my Michigan State folks
I can't go
and
with you
Wayne
there.
State folks out there too. So go green, Um, Sheila, what about you? What have you been up to?
Yesterday, we played hooky in the afternoon and we went to a lake and we went swimming for the first time. The day was gorgeous for the first time of the summer. So I feel like summer's actually kicked off now, which is awesome.
Good for you,
Mm,
Sheila. That's awesome.
well, I'm going off today for my regular golf lesson, which is going to be fabulous.
Nice.
It's a little rainy here, but as you know, with golf, rain don't stop no show.
No,
It
not
can't
for
al-
those 18 holes, Brian. No way, right?
exactly. Can't stop, won't stop. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that and being with dear friend of mine while we're out there having some fun. So it's gonna be a good week. It's gonna be a good week. As always, listen, before we begin, I want to remind our listeners that, listen, as always, you are part of this conversation. We want your questions, your comments, your thoughts. Just post them right here to our live chats on Facebook and YouTube. And you can be part of this conversation. We may even have your comment displayed on our live feed so we can get other people's information in here. Ladies, this is a great topic, but I don't want to introduce it yet. Let's begin with something like this.
In pop culture are accepted and celebrated for their introversion. However, introverts in the real world don't experience that all the time. Kind of like the opening musical number in Beauty and the Beast, where the entire village is making fun of Belle, introversion can be seen as a problem or social hindrance instead of a quirky attribute. In a society that seems to prefer extroverts, being an introvert can be challenging. Outgoing personalities are praised over soft-spoken and contemplative ones. Schools and our jobs are designed to cater to extroverts. Introverts are often forced to act like an extrovert. But what makes these two types so different? Many people fall on a spectrum, somewhere in between. Yet, we've assumed that these attributes depend on how a person relates to others. But these traits are linked to how you respond to social stimuli. Scott Barry Kaufman of the Imagination Institute explained the differences between how an extrovert and introvert brain engages in the dopamine reward system. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that awards behaviors and encourages you to repeat them again. In a way, it's also responsible for the habits you create, but I digress. When it comes to introverts and extroverts, an extrovert's brain is motivated by social stimuli, or rewards like food and social status. When faced with these rewards or the expectations of a reward, an extrovert's brain experiences more neurological activity. This activity is pleasant and motivates an extrovert to receive more social stimuli. For an introvert, the experience is different. An introvert's brain is more susceptible to dopamine increases and gets overwhelmed easily. This is why the introvert fizzles out when in social environments with too much stimulation. Introverts do not thrive with healthy doses of dopamine. They prefer acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is a slow-releasing neurotransmitter from the parasympathetic nervous system. It is also the primary reason why someone may prefer a quiet evening at home rather than being at a party. One theory posits that introverts may have more acetylcholine receptors than dopamine receptors. Putting aside neurological differences, neither introverts nor extroverts are better, and there is no such thing as a pure introvert or extrovert. As stated before, we all fall on a spectrum. Some just happen to lean more to either side, and few fall right in the middle. But why is it that we have to choose? Growing up, I was led to believe that being introverted was bad. People around me frequently misconstrued my quietness as shyness. I would often dread parent-teacher conferences because the remarks always were, "She's a great student, but she needs to participate more," as if my quiet temperament was problematic. Teachers and adults encouraged me to be more assertive and outgoing. I knew I didn't have to be assertive to be outgoing, but I made the effort to follow their request. I spoke more during class, involved myself in more activities, and passed as someone who was overly social. In reality, I was tired. It wasn't that I didn't want to be social. I preferred to stay at home reading rather than going out. I ignored my instincts, and without realizing it, I was limiting my strengths. Known introvert, Albert Einstein once said, "The monotony and solitude of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind." A 2016 study shows the relation of acetylcholine in learning and encoding new memories and information. So, when an introvert is in a quiet and calm environment, that's when they'll do their best in profound thinking. Western societies prefer extroverted individuals. Therefore, we assume that the person who speaks loudest has the best ideas. It's because of this bias that introverts are overlooked for leadership positions. But many world-respected leaders have been introverts. Abraham Lincoln, Rosa Parks, Mahatma Gandhi, Isaac Newton, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Charles Darwin. So it is often the soft-spoken person in the room who has the answers. Consequently, introverts make phenomenal leaders. Traits that define introverts, like good listeners and not micromanaging, make introverts good leaders. They give their peers free rein to work through their problems to find their unique solutions. Introverts can be passionate. They just manifest it differently. While an extrovert may be more vocal, introverts usually take the lead when it's something they truly care about. Unfortunately, introverts are forced to succumb to societal pressures. Everything in our society, from mandatory camera-on Zoom meetings to forced group projects, work against introverts. But the world needs introverts as much as they need extroverts. As a society, we should encourage and listen to introverts because their ideas can change the world.
Yes, they can. And as you guessed it today, we are talking about, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And what does this all mean, right? What's the real difference, and how can knowing that difference can support you? Well, the first question for both of you is, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Dr. Chanel, what do you think?
Well, based on all the tests and assessments we used to take, like the Myers-Briggs, for example, but
Right.
really just knowing me, I would consider myself an extrovert. I do have an incredibly big spirit. I have an incredibly big expression of that. And I think I've been that way for as long as I can remember. And even just because I've gone through transitions, I've gone from being, even when I was 4 and 5 years old, knowing that I was a big person, and then having that quieted for a period, but then regaining my power. All along, I've known, yeah, that I'm an extrovert. I really draw my energy from people. Even yesterday, I was in a room by myself, waiting for a meeting. So I went to go work at a place before my meeting, and I spent about 3 hours there, and I'm thinking, "Oh my god, this kinda sucks." I'm gonna be honest, and I just thought, "Wow," and I know why. It's because I do draw my energy from others and the expression thereof.
Wow. What about you, Sheila?
So I am a strong advocate that it is a spectrum,
Right.
and that a lot of us are not, one or the other. But if we were to use these terms, I would say that I'm an extroverted introvert, extroverted introvert, because
Right.
I do, when I'm public speaking or running groups, in certain situations, especially when their frequencies match mine, then I'm very social. And I do feel like I get energy from those situations. But when we look at it from the biological aspects that they talked
Yes.
about on here,
Yes.
it is so clear to me. And in fact, this conversation today started when I told you, Brian, that I was having an introverted week. Like,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that I was having trouble being on air. It was that I was having trouble thinking of something I wanted to talk about. So it worked out good, right? Because I just didn't have that motivation to take action as an extrovert in that way. But when we talk about the dopamine and the neurotransmitters versus the acetylcholine,
Yes.
that makes so much sense to me, because since I was young, I fall asleep. If I go, like I went to a museum, that's exhausting to me. Doesn't matter how big or small it is. And I had realized that it had to do with getting overstimulated. I love being there, but it very quickly go into a casino. I remember falling asleep on the stools of a casino in my earlier days because I was so tired, waiting for people to be done gambling, and then going to action movies. I went to see The Habit, and I had read the book, and I was so excited to see it, and I could not stay awake because of the flashing lights and all of the action that was happening, and to the point that was so frustrating. So biologically, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's cool because it takes it away from the social aspects of it. It doesn't mean I don't love people, being around people. It's just that energetically, my brain needs to balance that with quiet.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My parents, of course, are both, as everybody probably knows, both my parents are psychotherapists. And so, of course, they gave us all the tests in the world when we were younger. And I'm one of those, if we're talking about the spectrum, um, I'm one of the rare folks that sits literally right in the middle. Like it can move a little bit back and forth, depending upon what is going on. But there are just as many times at which I'm introverted with certain things that I am extroverted. And so, like you were saying, Sheila, one thing that's been difficult sometimes is, again, depending upon who I meet on the spectrum, there can be challenges because there are times at which I can meet somebody who's going through a period of being very extroverted, and I'm very introverted at that point. And we're kind of clashing a little bit. And then there's other times at which that same person is extroverted or less extroverted, and then I'm extroverted and everything's kind of fine. And they're like scratching their head, like, well, why weren't you like this the other day? Like, I listen, this is just who I am. Which is what I was going to get to. One of the reasons why I really love this topic today is because, we talk a lot about our authenticity, right? And really claiming and being your authentic self. Well, this is a topic where we can help people learn more about like who they are, not necessarily putting a label on it, right? This is just kind of like diving into the aspects of what that authenticity means for you, and that when you live that, when you're really being in that, it really empowers you to do all the other things that you want to do in life. So listen, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk a little bit more about, how do you know whether or not where you are on the spectrum, and why that's important too, because there's some important things that you probably never thought about that are part of all this. So listen, we're going to take a quick break. We'll have more with This Morning with Soulivity in just a little bit. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to take that first step towards true, unwavering inner happiness? Are you like thousands of people who have everything they need, not want, but need, and still can't seem to find happiness and fulfillment in their lives? If so, the Steps to Happiness show is for you. On my show, you will learn about the principles and practices that lead to true inner happiness. Because guess what? It isn't found in our external environment, but within ourselves instead. Together with my guests, we will explore the latest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being practices. And together, we'll advise you on the actionable steps you can take towards a happier, more fulfilled, authentic life. So I invite you to join me each week on Soulivity TV on the Steps to Happiness show with me, Teresa Greco.
And welcome back to This Morning with Soulivity. You can catch another great episode of the Steps to Happiness right here today on Thursday at 12 noon, where Teresa with her guests are going to be talking about We Are Powerful Creators, which I think is so apropos for today, since we're talking about living and being your authentic self. We're talking specifically about introvert versus extrovert. What does it mean, and what's the importance of it? Speaking of which, Sheila, I'll go to you first. What have been some of the things that you've learned about yourself, knowing this spectrum of being introverted and extroverted?
I think it's about, honoring where I am in each moment and giving myself time. Like yesterday, even when I said that to you, then I was able to be like, oh yeah, that's what's going on. Let's go to the beach, or nobody.
Exactly.
I also arrange things. So I love to go to festivals and different things like that, but I tend, and Zach is right there with me, which is convenient, but we tend to try, because we can choose our own schedules. So we go when there's less of a crowd to things, so we still do the things, but we don't hit it at the body to body moment. And then I keep myself accountable by telling people I will be somewhere, making plans with multiple people. So when that moment comes, I don't just say, oh, I'd rather stay home now. I've committed myself, because once I get there, I'll have fun. And then to just remember, sometimes I get really excited to be there and then I'm quiet at something. I do think that sometimes people think that I may be a snob or something because I seem so extroverted, but I'm really not great at small talk. I pretty much talk about deep things or I don't talk.
That's funny. Oh man. Dr. Chanel, what about you? What's something important that you learned about yourself, learning this spectrum of being introverted and extroverted?
Well, Brian, I appreciate the question.
Yeah.
Can I just reframe the way that we are talking about it?
Yeah.
So you said introverted versus extroverted. And I'm wondering, maybe we can tease apart that versus.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I
love that.
think that is where we start to get into this societal pressure and the preference in our society for extroverts. And it's starting even with our own language and the way that we frame it, right? So if I may, offer that.
Sure.
And then for myself, the way that I understand me, so I was giving the example yesterday, I was in this space, perfect quiet space. So if I was writing, writing for my book, perfect. But, I can only do that so long. So I work in a co-op intentionally because there are other business owners here. We have a community. So right now I'm in a silent phone booth and we have conference rooms and things like that, but I need to be in a space where there are other people. So my home office probably lasted a couple months before I sought out the kind of space that would give me the interaction and the engagement so that I could continue to, have that social stimulus. And I know for me, it's really important. And then for, and I don't know if we're going to go into this part, but the whole thing about the leaders, I think being extroverted in some ways does help. Like you come across more confident, you come across more assertive, like, for example, in the interview.
Mhm.
But as I'm giving leadership training, it's also a case where we are overlooking some really great people who balance out our world in their energy.
Mhm.
And so for me, I continue to be mindful of not only how I come across. So if I'm taking over a room and I notice that maybe I'm, shining too bright, and not to dim my light, but now I'm aware that I am very extroverted. I am very expressive. And I try to engage people maybe who are not, as expressive, but
Mhm.
also honor, like Sheila said, honor that, if you're not matching back my energy, I shouldn't dismiss you. I shouldn't judge you. I
Mhm.
should respect and honor that we just have different energies and we're interacting in a different way.
Mhm. Mhm. I love this conversation, and I want to say too that I really honor what you said at the beginning around there being a the label of that we put on people, whether or not they're an introvert or an extrovert, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I'll throw this question out here in terms of like the importance, and I think both of you kind of got to this, which is this concept of again, Sheila, you talked about the fact that there's a spectrum, right?
Mhm.
And that depending upon the person, at any given point, we may be in a level of authenticity where we're introverted in that moment, right?
Mhm.
Right.
And
Mhm.
that other moments, we may be more extroverted. And depending upon the spectrum, it would be more or less of one or the other, but it's always a combination, right? And
Mhm.
so, to your point, Dr. Chanel, around meeting people where they live and helping other people support you in where you live, it's kind of like understanding people's energy and in certain situations, understanding whether or not they're introverted or extroverted with that particular experience, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it could be a combination of both, but
Mhm.
we're all recognizing and supporting each other in being our authentic selves and empower, and then that power comes from that, right? Because like you said Sheila, like you went to the movie and it was all this action and you fell asleep. Well, it's not supportive if you're having a person that you already know is going to fall asleep on a movie like that, asking them to go to a movie like that.
Oh, I was the one that wanted to go to that. I couldn't wait for it.
Well,
Same
but
thing with Star Wars. It's been a whole life thing, but
right.
now I understand why.
Exactly. And so it's like supporting you and saying, "Hey, well, maybe we go see a different movie that's more intimate, that's more of a one-on-one kind of experience." And then that's something that both of you can enjoy, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's about respecting and that kind of thing, which I thought was like something that I've come into my own awareness about, and that we're kind of talking today about. So it's really important. Again, it's really important to honor people where they are in a positive way, right? And then using that position that they're in, especially if you're a leader, for strength.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Both, there's so many positive things that can come out of recognizing that, especially if you're an entrepreneur or you're a manager or you're, a leader of an organization, or even if you're an employee where you're being supported by a supervisor. Understanding that is so important. And then we're going to talk a little bit about like relationships, but it just makes life easier, I think.
Right. Yeah, quickly, Brian, can you
Yeah.
imagine being a leader and managing everyone the same way, and
Oof.
not understanding you've got some
Oh,
introverts? So,
well,
in terms of your evaluation of them, right?
well, I have. I
Yeah.
have done projects where the majority of the people, in terms of how they worked, were more extroverted, right? Where it was a lot of talk, a lot of things going on, and that kind of thing, and people wanted to, that kind of thing. And what I found was that as that person that's in the middle of the spectrum, it pushed my introverted side that button.
Mhm.
And I had to figure out how to use the energy of all this extroversion into and put it in and leading the project. And what I found was their process was to kind of talk through stuff. And so it became okay, right? So let them talk, write down the notes, use a tape recorder, and then have whoever is more introverted in that realm decipher the information alone. And it worked like a charm. They did all the analysis and all that, and they were happy. So everybody was happy.
Yeah.
Listen, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about, the importance of knowing this and knowing, how our loved ones are on the spectrum in different situations and how that can be better for your relationship. So we're going to be back in just about 30 seconds.
Years ago, when I started Soulivity, my vision was to support everyone in improving their life through the discovery of their passion and purpose, so they could become the best version of themselves, to battle fear and ignorance, and create a better world today. Get inspired to live your passion and purpose. Visit Soulivity.com now.
And we're back with more of This Morning with Soulivity. We're talking about introversion and extroversion and what all this matters and how this means in your life. I want to begin this next segment with a quick little quote from a great article that we found on this, which relates to, why this matters and what it means and that kind of thing. And it comes from Chelsea Connors, who's a board certified coach and therapist. She said, awareness and information are the key to creating meaningful change and fueling powerful decisions. This goes for relationships of all types. When we feel that we better understand where someone else is coming from or how they experience the world, it can be easier to empathize, relate, communicate effectively. Wow. Ain't that the thing? I mean, isn't that what this is all about? I think to your point earlier, Dr. Chanel, trying to figure out whether or not you are an introvert or are an extrovert has become just the thing, right? Putting people into labels, and that's not the point.
Right.
Exactly.
That's not the point.
Well, I think what the initial video talked about was that societal pressure and the, for you to conform. So even if you're not extroverted, in class, you have to raise your hand and you have to participate. On the job, in the boardroom, you have to speak, or, you'll be spoken over. And then all of that is being subconsciously taken in by those leaders who then, like we were talking about, evaluate you. And so there is definitely that pressure to be, maybe the thing that you're actually not, just to fit in and to be accepted. And so, I just believe firmly, as I continue to grow and evolve, that I want to accept the person in front of me as they are, and then, just learn and experience their energy and not put, like I said, my energy on them, so to speak, but to have it be dynamic and be an interchange. And that comes back to, or we haven't talked about it yet, but being emotionally intelligent, right? So the EI, being aware of who I am and my emotions and how I express, but then also being able to understand how others do the same and accept them for who they are and how they emote, for example.
If I had a ding, a little bell here, I would be ringing it right now, because I think you just hit the nail on the head when it comes to, this is an aspect of us increasing our emotional intelligence. That's what this is more about, right? And it's just not how we operate. It's how we operate in the context of learning how other people operate emotionally.
Yes.
And in each moment, I really like when you talked about it, it's a behavior that changes, right? The way we behave changes in different situations. So becoming more aware, like you're saying, Dr. Chanel, and observant, I think, rather than categorizing. One of the things that I think happens on the internet a lot on social media, especially, is that, coming from a point of having been trained as a psychotherapist, there's a lot of diagnosing going out in the world
Right.
on Instagram, like we can't do that. That's a professional, thing that's only used for helping us to understand each other better or helping us to understand ourselves. So when we use terms like this, we need to remember that everybody is on a spectrum. Even if you seem like you're in one end, in different situations, you're going to behave different ways. So it's really unfair to put ourselves or another person completely into a box and then start treating them from what we know about that box versus paying attention to them in the moment, which I think is what all of us are saying here today.
That is so true. I also think a part of this is our own fear of being inadequate and our fear of being hurt, right? And so if we are able to put a label on someone and say, okay, you're supposed to act this way, and that now I know how you're supposed to act, now I can prepare myself to protect myself from situations where I might be put in a place of discomfort, and now I can blame you, right? Because it's always, so a lot of times when we're hurt, we lash out and we want to blame the other person for hurting us, and that sometimes can come from a misguided expectation, right? And so this is all about like surrender and coming into a place, again, part of EQ, where we're just, we're being our authentic self, and we're making the effort to understand other people in their authenticity moment by moment.
As you were talking, I just thought of, circling back to Dr. Chanel, you with your son going off to college. One of the ways this could be used really well right now would be when picking a dorm partner or a roommate, right?
Man,
Like
good
that.
point.
Questions
point.
regarding this on, surveys about that, not necessarily labeling yourself, but do you want parties in your dorm? Do you like a lot of people in there? Do you like your quiet time? Like those are things that if we're living together or partnering up in work, that we should pay attention to, so that we go into those relationships
with our eyes wide open. And you bring a good point, because in the orientation, Sheila, the question was asked of the students, you need to think about, do you want your dorm room open? Well, that's significant, because that means you're inviting people into your space kind of randomly, or do you want to, keep your dorm room closed? So I asked my son, and he said, well, I want to keep my dorm room closed. And so that might be an example of, just the fact that you want your solace, you want your contemplative time, you want the quiet. You don't want just the noise, and the activity and the energy that's out in the hall and the busyness. Maybe you want to shield yourself from that, but then maybe you want to be open to that, and then just allow people to come in and meet you and, socialize and things like that. So that's a good point, especially as you are meeting new people.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is another part of this too, where, again, we're talking about, how introversion and extroversion can help support us in awakening to all of who we are. And maybe, we can think about, are we using parts of our spectrum to disempower ourselves, where it's like, oh, well, I don't like being around people, so I'm not going to be around people at all. Well, that's not, you're going to be around people. So you have to learn how to be around people in a way that's supportive to you, and that can help you create the best life that you have for today. So,
right. And the other side of that are people that are always keeping themselves busy and in a space to avoid their own self-reflection.
Yes, it goes both both ways for sure.
Absolutely. Oh, well, great conversation. Listen, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about in more of this, like how can learning about introversion and extroversion, how it can improve our lives and create more positive outcomes for ourselves. So we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be back with more of This Morning with Soulivity.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Soulivity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
And we're back with more of This Morning with Soulivity. We're talking about introversion and extroversion and how knowing so can improve your life. There, again, in this great article off CNET, Introvert versus Extrovert, what they mean and why it matters. I think the title is kind of like a little bit misleading because they're talking more about understanding yourself on the spectrum. Chelsea Connor, who's a board certified coach and therapist who's also been interviewed for this, talks a little bit about how understanding these two concepts can help improve your life. And there's this one great quote that I would just want to say. It says, I believe that the more information we can know about ourselves, what makes us tick, and how we can take care of ourselves is always going to improve the quality of life and overall happiness. I mean, that's so true. Let's talk about this a little bit because, we talked about before, like the reasons why it's important, specifically in like our relationships with people. Is that the only way that this kind of shows up for both of you, or there's some other things?
I'm thinking about my relationship to myself,
Yeah.
and going right into what just happened. Yesterday when I identified to you that I felt introverted, that was the first time I had thought about it. But then I had been really tired, like sleepy a lot
Yeah.
over the couple days before. And now when we're talking about the way the brain works and how it actually makes me sleepy to be overstimulated, there's been, family graduation parties, people staying at my house, celebrating here. We put the book out, so I've been on multiple interviews, and I just had and then the construction out my window, like all this stimulation. And though I was working like a lot, I also was like so tired. I thought there was something either physically wrong with me or I was being lazy. And as soon as I put it all together, I was like, oh, I'm being perfectly normal. I even went to a museum during all of this, right?
Wow.
So yeah, it made total sense. And then I didn't have to worry about, is there something going on with my health? What's going on? I was just like, oh no, this is just me reacting, and I'll take a nap and I'll be ready for the next phase. So
wow,
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, knowing our tendencies, as this life coach says in this article, says knowing our tendencies can help us find a better equilibrium when we're off center, which is exactly what was happening for you over these last few days. And I know for myself, I can have a swing, a quote unquote kind of swing where I might be a little bit more outgoing, and then the next morning I'm like, okay, I've had enough of that. I'm gonna go out into the garden and I'm gonna work the garden today.
Yeah.
Well, I
Or
think
yeah, go ahead, Tasha.
yeah, Brian, I think it's like what you're saying, there's a balance, right? And
Mm-hmm.
we know, our bodies know, our souls, our spirits know when we've gone maybe on one side or the other, because I believe we have a center, right, of
Mm-hmm.
our true selves and what's good for us. And when you're saying, is it beyond just the relationships? Yeah, I think like Sheila, the relationship with myself, I'm thinking more of that growth opportunity. And so even though I'm extroverted, when you go into a new room with new people, for example, I'm a business owner, so I go to networking events. And when I go, I can do it, right? I can turn it on and I can engage and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
when I leave, I'm thinking, "Whew, I'm so glad that's over."
Right.
But
Right.
you also need to stretch. We need to continue to grow and evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do need to put ourselves in situations that might make us feel uncomfortable, especially when, like, as a business owner, there might be some opportunities there for me. And so
Exactly.
if I were not to go because the thought of engaging and the thought of being on is just not what I want to do. I'd rather be at home, on the couch reading a book. Well, that's fine. But are you missing opportunities for one aspect of yourself versus another? Likely, or conversely, if I'm always out networking and I'm not in the office
Right.
quietly maybe working on a proposal or quietly making prospect calls, right? That's going to also interfere on the other side. And so there always has to be a balance, right? There's always two sides of a coin. And I think we need to see where we are and continue to see what makes us uncomfortable and maybe consider leaning into that on occasion so that we
Mm-hmm.
can
Mm-hmm.
grow and stretch. And I will just give you a quick example. Back to my son when he was exploring high school or schools to go to. Actually, this was for middle school. He had an opportunity to go to a conservative type school, which is where his comfort was. And then he looked at a more liberal school. And as it turns out, he ended up going to the liberal school, and we kind of encouraged him to do that because he needed to grow. He needed to get out of his comfort zone in that conservatism. And yes, it might be his dominant area, but now his whole world has opened up in terms of
Mm.
experiencing a completely different energy, a completely different environment. And so I think it's just important to know where we are and how we can continue to grow and stretch and lean into those things that might make us uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And again, this is all going back to, living, from our point of authenticity, understanding ourselves deeper, better, more thoroughly, and then picking and choosing those aspects where we know based upon that information, that because that information is key, right? The information awareness around, hey, if I'm going to be successful, here's some areas where I can kind of push the boundary a little bit,
Mhm.
and kind of move myself forward in life, to to the successes that I know that I can reach. Great conversation today on this.
Yeah.
Listen, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we'll have some final thoughts from everyone.
Years ago, when I started Soulivity, my vision was to support everyone in improving their life through the discovery of their passion and purpose, so they could become the best version of themselves, to battle fear and ignorance, and create a better world today. Get inspired to live your passion and purpose. Visit soulivity.com now.
And we'll do some final thoughts. Sheila, I'll go to you first.
I'm thinking that as we've had this conversation, to me, it comes down to the more we understand ourselves, and this whole spectrum of behavior and biology that is affecting the spectrum from being very introverted to very extroverted, we can show up consciously in each moment for ourselves and for others. And with that knowledge, we can just apply it without having created a checkbox, but use and draw from that knowledge to be as supportive as we can in each moment.
I love that. Love that. Dr. Chanel?
Yes, Sheila, show up consciously. I have a saying, yeah, I want to be present to the person in front of me. And I don't want to have those preconceived notions, those biases, those check marks or those check boxes, as you mentioned, Sheila. I want to take them for who they are. And I also want to be received in terms of who I am. So maybe we can just all be who we are more fully, but also opening up and allowing or leaning into spaces that might make us feel slightly uncomfortable so that we can get to know other people, better understand other people, and have more meaningful and deeper connections with people.
Love that. Love that. My final thought's gonna go to this one little quote from this article um, from the Federation of European uh, animal veterans. It's this woman who wrote this article, and she came into the awareness that she's more introverted than extroverted on the spectrum. And she says, I'm an introvert, and like other introverts, I feel more of a connection to animals than people. They are a lot less complicated, and I don't get into small talk, barring the occasional baby babbles to a cute puppy. Also, the introverted traits of quiet persistence, extended solitary study, and being detail oriented are the exact traits that are selected for in a vet school selection criteria. It was a revelation to me to find out about introversion and extroversion and realize I'm strongly introverted. It was so important because it highlighted to me how I should look after myself to recharge my batteries and to stop fighting my innate tendency to quiet time alone with a book or over going out and being social. So, again, this is all about us being our authentic selves 24/7. And from that information, learn how we can live, grow, and have better lives uh, with ourselves and with others. So that's my time.
Very nicely put.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Why don't we do some shameless Soulivity plugs? I'll go to you, Dr. Chanel, first, because you've got this really, 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 really cool masterclass that's coming up really soon.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit
Look
more
at there.
about that?
Yeah, so I invite everyone to join me on this Saturday, the 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for an hour. We're going to talk about stop settling for the good life.
Hey.
And that all that means is that we're going to, be thankful for the goodness in our lives, but see, is it preventing us from getting to our greatness and what we really want? Or have we been co-opted and borrowed other people's dreams and aspirations? We want to get you to your dreams and aspirations and get over the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that might be getting in the way. So please join us.
All right. I love
Nice.
it. Love 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 it. And of course, you've got your ongoing
Yes.
complimentary coaching sessions going
Yep.
on.
Thank you, Brian. And yes, even after the masterclass, before the masterclass, always open to a tea chat to talk about you specifically and how I can help move you past where you are in terms of where you want to go.
All right. Love it. Hey, I see with these shameless but great plugs here.
Thanks, Brian.
Let's talk about this great new book that you've got that you're and Zach are part of, Sheila.
Yes, Zach, my partner Zach and I are co-authors in the Energy Healers Oracle Tools for Total Transformation. It came out last week, I think, and is already an international bestseller. So that's exciting. There are 20 master healers from around the world, each sharing one of their healing modalities and how they work to help you transform your life.
I love it. I love it. And of course, you've got the Soul Connection sessions that are going on here.
Absolutely. And for everyone on Soulivity, if you use the code SOUL23, you will get $44 off your first session. Those are custom designed for you. We take a moment to see what it is that you want to do in connecting deeper to your soul and to loved ones. And from that point, we utilize all my skills and gifts to support you in taking that next step.
Ooh-wee. See, I love these shameless plugs. I'm going to do one go back for you, uh, Dr. Chanel, because you also have a fantastic book out.
Oh, thank you.
And so I want to just make sure we do a shout out for that.
Come back to yourself, love life, live free.
Hey, whoop, 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 whoop. That's how we do it. And you can buy that on Amazon. We're going to include the link for people so that they can go out and check that out as well. I have a shameless plug today about some new exciting news for Soulivity itself, where a new Soulivity.com is coming to you shortly. In about 2 weeks, we're going to be launching a new platform that's going to blow your socks off. So we want you to enjoy that, bringing more features to everyone, more great content as always, but just, trying to improve and evolve what we do here so that you can live your best life today. So just a little something that we wanted you to know about. Listen, parting is such sweet sorrow, but we've got to end because we're running out of time. Dr. Chanel, Sheila, thank you so much for being here, being my co-host today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, remember to follow us on social media and join our mailing list by visiting this morning Soulivity site at soulivity.com /this morning. On behalf of all of us, I want to say again, thank you for joining us for another great episode of This Morning with Soulivity. Of course, we want you to come back and join us every weekday at 8 a.m. Eastern for our live broadcast, Monday through Friday, or you can listen to us at 9 a.m. Pacific time, Thursday and Friday on KMET 1490 AM radio for all of you guys on the West Coast. Listen, until next time, keep having real conversations with passion and purpose that empower you to create a life full of high quality living today. And on behalf of all of us, Dr. Chanel, Sheila, and myself, we will see you next time. See you later.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other rights reserved.